And God's will, the purpose of the call, the power of the call is that God will do whatever it is that he's calling you to do. But the purpose of the call, according to verse 2, is that they would be holy. So he writes to those sanctified in Christ Jesus, called to be saints. You say saints. I thought that was a Catholic thing. You know, Catholics, you can canonize someone, make them a saint. Mother Teresa was a saint. Feed a bunch of orphans, you become a saint. Give a bunch of money, you can become a saint. But Paul, he's not a very good Catholic. He basically says, if you're a believer, if God's called you to salvation, then you're a saint. You're called to be a saint. And the word saint just means set apart, holy, different. So if you want to talk about your calling in life, what's the purpose of my calling? You can say with confidence before you say anything else about your calling that God has called you to be holy, to stand out, to look different. That God's will is whatever, as someone once said. God's will isn't so much about where you go to college or where it is that you work as it is about why you work or why you pursue your education. It isn't so much about what you do, it's about who you are while you're doing it. That God's called you to stand out, that it's not so much about what career path that you choose or where it is that you work, but it's about how you do your work. God's will is that you look different. So just imagine, if you think about your calling, whatever it is that God's called you to, whatever it is that he's put you there in 2015, imagine if we began to live out the purpose of our calling. What if we actually looked different? Just take an example of marriage. What if every Christian did their marriage Christianly? Or let me just pick on the men, because I don't want to pick on the women. So that's not smart. All right, men. Paul says, Ephesians 5, love your wives as Christ loved the church. What if every Christian married man loved their wives with selfless, sacrificial love? Do you think that would change this church? Do you think that we could change this city? Just the men of Broadview, if every single one of us, instead of being so self-concerned and focused on ourselves and fixated on our own needs, what if we denied ourselves and put our wives first and loved them the way Christ loved the church? You would stand out, you would be holy, and you would change the world. You'd be living according to the purpose of your calling. And see, that's what Paul's saying. And it's not just with marriage, and it's not just with men, but he's saying men and women in every single area of your lives. My calling isn't about where you work, it's about why. It's about what you're doing. It's about who you are. It's about looking different in your sexuality and your singleness and your marriage and your loyalties and your commitments and everything that you do in life. You need to stand out. That I'm creating a city within the city, a kind of counterculture that's going to change the world. It's a big macro level movement, and I'm calling you to look different. Called to be saints, along with all those, Paul says, who in every place call on the name of the Lord. So those of you who have called on Jesus, the elect, the ones who've put your faith in Christ, he's telling these Corinthians, you're not God's gift to green earth. It's not all about you. You're not the only game in town. Pick up your eyes, look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that there are churches and Christians all over Asia Minor who have been called to do what you're called to do, which is to stand out and look different. And imagine, think about this, if every single Christian, not just in Broadview, not just the men, not just in Abilene, but if every single Christian in this world began to live according to the purpose of their calling, they begin to look different, and you think that we could change the world? Absolutely. And that's the purpose of our calling. We get so fixated. Our concern when it comes to our calling and God's concern when it comes to our calling it's so often different. God's concern isn't so much about where you go to college. His will isn't so much about what career path you choose. His concern is that you display with your life in college or at your workplace that Jesus Christ is Lord. That you're holy. So that's what it's about. He's called you to be a saint. Holy, set apart, look different.